Get your hands together for the first session of the day. Bring ISV docs to chat with Copilot, and more extension you can do.
So just hold on, we're going home. Like you ever be wired. Like you ever be wired. You can stay on the way.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our talk. I'm Sam, and I'm joined with Purusharth here today. And we'll talk a bit about chat in Business Central and all the different tools that you have available to extend it. So for the agenda today, we'll go through kind of what's new, but also as part of that, we'll do a quick recap of chat, just in case you're not aware of all the capabilities it has today. But then we'll dive into these new capabilities of how you can extend chat with your own documentation, some improvements to like metadata searching that we're doing, which allows us to search semantically. And then after kind of doing a deep dive on these things, we'll cover some suggestions that you can take to prepare your extensions for chat and basically build them in a way that chat can consume these nicely. And then at the end we'll talk a little bit about what's coming next in extensibility. So we'll dive into what's new. But to kind of recap, there's like mainly two capabilities that chat can do. So the first is like finding relevant records, and the other is looking into how to do business processes. So Copilot is kind of really nice at like finding these records and doing things that are like a one-time query instead of like maybe saving a page view or something like that. And really to get the most out of it, and it is Tech Days as well, understanding a little bit how this works under the hood is kind of good in writing good queries in chat. And effectively what happens is when you're writing something, what chat will do is it will try to figure out what page you're actually talking about, and then it will go to this page and try to construct just a normal BC filter for that page, and then with that it will take the results, and that's kind of what you'll see in the results. So bearing that in mind, it's quite good to normally specify the type of page that you're interested in and like the filters that you would like to have, how you would like it sorted, that kind of thing. And obviously it is a chat, right? So you might get some results, but you can then ask some clarifying questions. So for example, what you saw on the previous question was just finding some sales orders for a particular customer. But maybe I'm just interested in like which one was actually the highest amount. And this is just something you would look up every now and again. And then chat will just tell you the answer straight away. Obviously, you get like citations and that kind of thing. So you can kind of be confident in these answers and very easily check just by going to the BC page and seeing the filters that have been applied. So then for the next capability, Copilot today can also search the Business Central documentation and answer product-based questions there. So here, for example, you can look up for some particular terminology, and then you get the results from Microsoft Learn. What's kind of interesting with how this works under the hood is we aren't actually using Bing or anything like this. We go to the documentation source directly and do these kinds of queries, which is kind of why it's only the Learn documentation for now. But obviously, as the name of the talk talks about your documentation, you'll see how that kind of changes. But anyway, with like the core Business Central documentation, you can also ask all these kind of follow-up questions, and it will pull out the relevant bits from that documentation. And it's just a really nice way to kind of complement any kind of onboarding and training that you have within Business Central. So these are things that can be done today. There's a few other new things that I've also recently rolled out. So first is that you can start writing more complex queries now that take advantage of the analysis views that we have within the product. So basically, chat will construct the analysis view for you, and then with a button, it will just open up the view. And also just to kind of help with the general discoverability of Copilot actions and kind of improve the immersiveness. If you're looking at a page and it has like Copilot actions, the chat is also aware of these actions, so you can see that that like chat can surface them to you, so that it kind of helps with the discoverability there. And as the talk is about, coming soon, very soon, is the ability to chat with your documentation that you guys have, so you can really improve this onboarding and training experience for the end users, and this semantic metadata navigation. So let's dive straight in, and I'll show you how you can extend chat with your documentation. So I will just change here. So for an example, we have on the BC Tech GitHub repo, we have some Azure OpenAI samples here, and I've just taken the Get Started app here, and so I've cloned it, and the main thing I made some small changes, but the main thing I've changed here is I've specified in the app JSON the GitHub repository, because that is the source of my documentation for this extension. So I can go ahead and publish it, and then hopefully it doesn't take too long. And then, obviously this will publish the extension to my sandbox. And then when that's done, that's kind of all the prep work that you need to do to onboard. Oh, nice, I have internet issues. That's always good. It should be here, but we'll just refresh and see what happens. If I go to, I can just show you extension management. You'll see here that we have the extension already stored, the Copilot toolkit demo. So I can open chat, and now I can ask questions around this. So I can say like, are the BC AI BC Tech samples? And obviously that stuff isn't really captured in the Microsoft Learn documentation, or like the core Business Central documentation. This is all coming from the GitHub repository. So hopefully we get a reply in a second. And yeah, exactly. So you see there are some more samples, and yeah, there's a link here that takes me straight to the README, where I can read more about the samples. So that's kind of pretty cool. I'll jump back to the slides. So yeah, so how does this actually work? So yeah, as you kind of saw, the only thing I changed here on my app JSON is the URL of kind of where my documentation is located. And so this URL is passed along to chat, and basically for all your extensions that have been deployed to the environment, they are all passed along to chat. And then when chat sees there's like some kind of ask that is relevant to like documentation, it will do a Bing search that is scoped to these URLs. So then it will find relevant pages from this documentation. And then we do all the same grounding checks that we do for like the Learn documentation today to ensure everything is still accurate. So that's it. So how do you try it out? So the very first thing is to make sure that your documentation is actually indexed by Bing. Like we use Bing to find it, so if it's not on there, we'll struggle. And it will be available soon in sandbox environments, so you can validate your documentation before it reaches everyone. But you will need to go to the Copilot and Agents capabilities page, and there'll be a new toggle to enable Bing search for this stuff, and then it should just work. And then hopefully for the release wave 2 at the later this year, it will be available in production environments as well, and then end users can take advantage of it as well. Yeah. And then some kind of best practices. So obviously it's all being crawled by Bing in order to find relevant results. So HTML and text-based documentation is the best. PDFs do like kind of work, but images don't really work. Another thing to note is like you might have just a short URL that you put in the app manifest that redirects you to something else, but that isn't really understood when we scope the URL, so we don't follow those redirects. And the actual documentation like root path can only be up to two levels deep. So if it's like, I don't know, many levels deep, then it won't scope to that, unfortunately. And we've also seen some cases where it gets a bit confused if you have like uncommon characters like pipes in your URL that kind of thing. So if you can keep it just kind of ASCII or like alphanumeric, that would be best. Yeah, but Purusharth, maybe you can tell us a bit about the semantic metadata search.
Just gonna switch my screen. All right, so hi everyone, my name is Purusharth Dwivedi. I'm an engineer with the platform team at Business Central. And we have been making some improvements to how the underlying search works in Business Central. And I'm not talking about the data search or the modern search that you saw come out in the last few months, because that one works on your tables and on the data that you have on your tables. I'm talking more about metadata search, right? Now, metadata search is a search on the entities that you have in your Business Central. And those entities come from your extensions, they can come from your base app, and they're usually pages or reports, right? And you interact with this system almost every day. Like every time you use the Tell Me search, which is the search that you have at the very top, or you're using the Report Explorer, or you're using Business Central Copilot Chat, you are interacting with the metadata search system one way or another, right? And the thing is, as we move to a smarter ERP system, as we bring in agents, it becomes even more important to navigate the metadata system or the metadata search system in a smarter way as well. So let's take a look at how we use this system for Copilot Chat as an example. So here I have a query, or the user has a query, find all my customers in Germany, right? So what Copilot tries to do is it tries to understand the intent of the user. And as a part of that intent analysis, we'll try to map any entities that we find in the user's request to our Business Central entities, right? So in this case, for example, it finds the page identifying phrase as customer, and it maps customer to the customer list page, and Copilot Chat answers your query because it gets the information from that page. But what if the query changes, right? Find all my clients in Germany. The intent of the user has remained the same. You're still trying to get to customers from Germany. But if you have a simple string similarity-based search approach or tokenization, TF-IDF, whatever, something like this will not map to customer, right? So what do you do right now? Well, what you do right now is you define in the page's metadata some additional search terms. So for example, in the customer page, if you provide a clients in the additional search terms, all of a sudden this query will work, Copilot will map the original intent to the customer list entity, and you get a response. But I think you can already see some problems with this approach. The biggest one being that if you want to support different languages, this approach doesn't work well, right? There's also scalability challenges. How many additional search terms can you actually cram in that metadata? At the same time, suppose you have new customers, they understand the processes, they understand how to do things. Maybe they are coming from a competitor, but at the same time, they do not know the exact Business Central terminology, and all of a sudden, it makes sense that we need to have a smarter metadata search system. We need to navigate metadata in a smarter way, right? So let's try to build a smarter metadata search system. There's two initial approaches we can try with. The first one is query expansion on the original user request. And then we can also use LLMs to reinterpret the query in the context of BC. What I'm talking about is, in case of query expansion, once you have identified that clients is a page identifying phrase that you need to map to the Business Central metadata, you can just add synonyms. You can use a small language model, which is a very popular approach, but you can also use some traditional approaches like using WordNet to get synonyms for clients. So in this case, the query expansion, for example, can give you buyers, clients, and customers. And you hope that one of them is going to match with the actual Business Central entity, which is the customer page, right? Or one of the search terms that you have on that page. But as you can see, the actual matching still is a very textual operation, right? In the second example, how you can use LLMs for reinterpreting, let's take the query as an example. Do we have any Toyota Corolla in stock? Now, this query does not mention any page identifying phrase or entity that you can directly map to. So what LLM-based approach can do is it can try to interpret this query in the context of Business Central. And in Business Central, where do you have inventory information? You have it on the items page. But these approaches have drawbacks, especially the second one. It's possible you have a more specialized page for storing information about Toyota Corolla, cars, vehicles, right? And so you don't want to use the items page. And similarly, you are losing specifics of the user's intention when you're doing any sort of reinterpretation. There's also another approach, text embeddings, and let's try and explore how we can use the vector embedding or the text embedding approach. All right, so what exactly is text embedding models or vector embedding models, right? First of all, this is not a new idea. We have had these models way back, 2013, Word2Vec by Google. It was a landmark model back then. And we have had more recent models, whether it's a text embedding model from OpenAI or BERT by, again, Google. And the idea of these embedding models is very simple. You take a piece of text as input, and for that piece of text, these models output a vector representation with n dimensions. The dimensionality depends on how big the model is. So if you have a bigger model, it may be 8,000 dimensions. If you have a smaller model, maybe 600 or 1,200 dimensions, right? At the same time, we have had two types of these embedding models, static and contextual. Static models, they just work on a word level. Okay, I should give you some context. This is all just for similarity. Like we are trying to build a different kind of similarity apart from something like text similarity, right? So static models, for example, you have the word bank, right? There's two sentences, I'm at the bank. The bank word has a different meaning compared to, let's say, I'm at the river bank. Static models cannot capture that because they work on a word level, whereas contextual models or the newer models, they do. In fact, contextual models are very similar to the large language models that you're using nowadays. The difference being that in LLMs, you create an internal representation and then you try to predict the next token from that internal representation, whereas in text embedding models, you just output that internal representation, right? So at the end, what do we get out of it? What you get out of it is that if you have two pieces of text which are belonging to the same underlying topic, they are going to show high degree of similarity between their vector representations. So now that we have this idea of how we can use vector models, let's try to build a system, right? Simple, we'll prepare our metadata, we'll index our page and reports, we'll convert each of the metadata to a embedding representation. And now every time there's a user query, we'll convert that as well. We'll map it to the same vector dimension. And then we'll use something like a cosine similarity, which is, as you can see, just the angle between the original metadata and, let's say, the user query that you're trying to search for, right? And if there's something, or if there's a query that's completely unrelated, then, it's, for example, in this case, cats, it's going to show a very high angle between the page metadata and the search query. At the same time, something to remember is most of the embedding models that you have nowadays, they have a magnitude of 1, so you don't really need cosine similarity. You can also just do dot product. But okay, now we know we can use vectors, and amazing, right? It has some problems as well, right? Vectors allow you to search by intent. It allows you to search by similarity on the underlying topic. But they can sometimes return conceptually related things which may be irrelevant. At the same time, if you already know what you're looking for, if you want some information from a particular page, it doesn't make sense to project to an embedding and then try to do similarity or something of that sort, right? At the same time, vector embeddings don't do well with technical terms, acronyms, because same acronym can also belong to like multiple things in the wild on the internet. But the biggest problem is lack of metadata. Suppose you have two pages. You have page on the left, you have the page on the right. The page on the left defines good metadata for itself, but the page on the right, let's say the left page is sales invoice, posted sales invoice defines everything. The right page is just invoice. Now the invoice page, the embedding will not capture the nuances. And so what will happen is every time you're trying to search for posted sales invoice, invoice lines, it will always show up. And that's the problem with vector-based approach. If you do not have enough metadata, the quality of embeddings is poor, and then these documents just add a lot of noise. And so the final solution is that we use a hybrid approach. We combine text similarity, we combine it with semantic similarity, and we also combine it with some other signals that we have, such as, for example, if the page is bookmarked, right? And what that means for the customer is that now you can search by intent and semantics rather than just depending on string similarity-based metrics. For chat-like scenarios, it means that these scenarios can better understand the user's intent. So you have improved accuracy on, for example, partner extension entities, which chat doesn't know about natively. At the same time, embeddings also allow you to make searches across your Business Central entities, in this case, in multiple languages, because a number of these embedding models, they are multilingual because of the data set that they are used with. And so finally, when can you try it? Right, so it's still a work in progress, but I think we are planning the first release in the next month. It will be available from the feature management, so if you enable it, the indexing operation will start in the background, and chat will switch to the new semantic metadata search approach. So let me show you what I mean. I'm gonna show a small demo. One second.
And so a quick question I have as well is like, is this coming to other areas of the product as well?
Yes, so we are also building it for the Tell Me search that you see, so you will be able to do much better searches, but it's also a work in progress, and we'll have more to announce in that, and also Report Explorer. Okay, so I think you can see my screen. So I have a simple page here, which is just a car list page. I'm just going to refresh my page here. And that is the example I wanted to show, but I'm just going to remove that. Yeah, so I have a simple page, car list. It just has makes and models and years of some cars, right? And this is an interesting example because we had a query on Yammer. A partner had a very simple query for Copilot chat, but since the entity was not mentioned in the intent or the query of the user, the Business Central entity, the BC Copilot chat kept redirecting them to the items page, even though they had a much more specific page for their use case, right? So, one second. So I'm gonna take a few queries I had. Let's start with this one. It's the same query. Again, it doesn't mention the entity that you have in Business Central, but metadata search is going to solve this problem. Let's see. So again, like I mentioned, it's going to create an embedding for the user intent. It's going to try to map it to the Business Central entities. And then it will do a hybrid ranking-based approach. And it's a little bit slower because it's running locally. And yeah, as you can see that it finds the car. So that's the small demo I have, and I'm gonna move the deck again back to you, Sam.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, so we want to talk a bit about preparing the extensions?
Yes, sorry.
Maybe?
All right, so I mean, once we have the metadata search in place, right, we also need to make sure that you can actually use it in an effective manner, right? And so there's a few things that you need to remember when you are creating or publishing your extensions, right? So the first one being that chat works on list pages that are backed by a source table. It doesn't work on, say, I'm gonna switch. It doesn't work, say, on temporary tables or virtual tables. So your page does need to have a proper normal table, right? At the same time, the response format that you see from chat at the same time, the response format that you see from chat on the top right, you define that using field groups on the underlying table of your Business Central extension, right? And chat can also bring in additional fields if you request them or if they are relevant to your query, as you can see on the bottom right. Finally, chat also cannot access any page or table that is not already accessible to the user. And this is all just normal, standard Business Central permission system. At the same time, if you do not want chat to bring in additional fields from the underlying table, you can disable it. And you can do it from the profile page by disabling personalization for that particular profile. Now, Let's talk about where to define the metadata to get the best results from Copilot Chat and any of the future AI scenarios, right? First of all, Chat works on the tables and records, but it uses the metadata on the pages for actual navigation. And so for tables, you can start on a field level by providing metadata for captions and tooltip. The tooltips can be 1 or 2 lines, nothing more than that, and caption just. If you don't have a good enough name for the field itself, you can use caption. Otherwise, we default to the field. And finally, on the table, you also specify a brick field group to define the default response format for Copilot Chat, right? And something to note is that any field like the JSON field, media field, blob field, all of these fields are ignored by Chat. At the same time, fields that do not have a tooltip are also ignored by Chat. On the pages, you have, again, the same field level metadata. You specify captions and tooltips. At the same time, something to remember is if your table does not have a tooltip or a caption, you can still specify it on the page because the page metadata overrides the metadata that is in the underlying source table. And finally, on the page definition level, you need to provide usage category, which makes the page searchable by the metadata search system. You provide caption, additional search terms, maybe 1 or 2, whatever you think is the best. And then you provide an about text. An about text is probably the most important one. It should be short, concise, maybe 1 or 2 lines, and it should give a good idea of what your page extension is about. And finally, on an extension level, you provide the help URL. This is, as Sam mentioned, it's very important for the ISV documentation question answering that is coming up. And so just on your app.json, provide a help URL for your documentation. But the next question is, what if your documentation is not accessible through a URL? Maybe you have a local setup or something of the sort. So I think here is where Sam will come in.
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question. So really that kind of leads towards what's actually next in extensibility. And there's a bit of a new buzzword in town you may have heard, is this model context protocol thing. Everyone's kind of talking about it at the moment. But really it seems to be like a nice opportunity for solving like these extensibility problems that you have within LLM scenarios. But as with every new thing, there's a lot of hype around it right now. But what actually is it? So I'll spend some time just to quickly walk through and explain what it actually is. But at its core, it's basically just a protocol that is used to provide context to a large language model. So model context protocol. And effectively, this means that you can standardize how these LLM capabilities are extended. It doesn't matter like what the underlying implementation of this service is. The protocol kind of takes care of it for you. Now you might be thinking, like, okay, but sure, there's other ways to load in like context to models, right? Like if you have an API, you might have an open API definition or like a Swagger file. And yeah, sure, you could like read this in and provide that context to the LLM. But kind of what really differentiates like MCP from like the old way of loading in API definitions is that there's a lot of clutter in these API definitions that either you need to spend time pre-processing and then feeding into the LLM, or there's just a lot of noise that the LLM has to like handle, which burns through tokens and kind of consumes this reasoning power. Whereas like MCP, you can think of as like an LLM first approach for this kind of thing. So it's a lot easier and more natural way of like loading in tools and that kind of thing. So how does it actually work? Effectively, it's a client-server model. You have a MCP client that can connect out to multiple MCP servers, and then the servers tell the client what each server can do, and then the client can kind of decide which of these servers to call and that kind of thing. And obviously, the LLM plays a key role in there to decide what to do. It's been originally developed by Antwerp, And there's this URL here, modelcontextprotocol.io, that has kind of a lot more documentation and information on how it actually works. So if you're kind of curious, that's where you can take a look. So what kind of context can MCP provide? And effectively, MCP has a few primitives available. It has resources, tools, prompts. So resources, you can think of those as just like files or like just random data. Tools are functions that are designed for LLMs to invoke, and prompts are prompts. And a lot of the focus at the moment, I would say, is looking at providing tools from servers to clients. It's very interesting because if you think of these tools that an MCP server can expose, and you think of like how I described how chat was working earlier at the start of the talk, of that we have a few capabilities. You can think of these capabilities as tools, effectively. So it'd be very interesting if we had a look at leveraging MCP tools for chat, and then you can specify your own MCP server that the chat as MCP client would connect to, and we'll see how that goes. So I have a demo. I just want to say a bit of a disclaimer. It is like from the lab, and everything here will definitely change. I thought it would be cool to show you, and I'm very keen to hear feedback from you all. So I'll swap over. So I'm just thinking where to start. So if I go over to BC, actually, so there is another website. So the extension I have uses GitHub for my documentation source, but I actually would prefer to use some other documentation provider that maybe is a bit better than what we have built specifically for GitHub. So there is a website called Dwivedi, and just to show you how it works, if I go to this, so the way it works is in Dwivedi, you specify a GitHub repo, and then you can ask questions in natural language about it. So here I can say like, what types of transport are supported? So here Model Context Protocol. Model Context Protocol is the repo for MCP, and you can see here I can ask like what types of questions are supported here, and it's looking at the code base, and you can see here that it supports standard I/O and HTTP transports. So it's cool that you can get this information in like a chat-like experience here. But what's actually interesting is if I go to mcp.dwivedi.com, they actually have an MCP server just sitting here. So what I can actually do is I can go to AL, and there's a new system table called Copilot Chat Tool, and at least this is the initial thinking. And here you can specify an MCP server name and an MCP server endpoint, and then we have a few other kind of primary keys of like the company, the user, page. We'll probably change the profile that help filter or scope the MCP server to a particular context that when chat launches a new conversation, we load in the appropriate MCP server. So you can see here in this case, I've just put in this MCP server and given it a name. There's also an implementation code unit. So for more runtime stuff, you would define a implementation code unit. And this gives you a little bit more control in how to connect to this MCP server. So you'll see here, you can provide the tools that you're willing. So the MCP server will provide a list of tools. And then here you can kind of override that list of tools and say, actually, I only want chat to be able to use this particular tool. For scenarios where you're kind of wanting to take full control of something, and you don't really want the core platform skills to potentially like take the requests from you, we also have another parameter here, the Copilot tools. And here you can remove the internal tools. So for example, if I'm adding like a new documentation provider, like Dwivedi here, then I can unload our documentation provider so that they're not fighting with each other. In this case, Dwivedi is unauthenticated, but there might be some headers that you want to provide for additional context, or like authentication headers or authorization headers. So you can do so here, and you can also provide a status message that will show up in chat while we wait for this server to run. So yeah, let's go ahead and actually give it a go. So if I go back to BC and I open chat, so because I haven't really scoped this record to anything, it will just load it always. So I can say like, what types of transport supported in, and so here I do need to specify the GitHub repo because obviously Dwivedi doesn't know, but I can go ahead and yeah, send off that query. And so now it's already invoking the tool on the MCP server. You'll see in a few seconds, here we go, my custom status message. And then hopefully Dwivedi will come back, yeah it has, with some information. And then we render that information inside chat here. So it's pretty cool that you can see this. But this is maybe a bit abstract. You know, I haven't shown you how this MCP server works. So what if I go ahead and just show you a very simple hello world like MCP server. So if you go to that model contextprotocol.io website, you can very quickly build your own tool like this. And you can see here I have a tool which is just called get information, and I say this will get information to to answer the user's query based on their intent. And so this is kind of interesting, right? Because this is how you can, for your integrations, you can figure out what the actual current query of the conversation is. So like if there's been lots of back and forth in the chat, you can just get a single string which is like summarize the conversation effectively. So it's easier to handle. And so that's nice if you want to integrate with an LLM yourself, and because then you have the natural language kind of query that you can pass further downstream. But maybe you don't want to do any LLM stuff yourself. You're just a service that's doing normal stuff. So you can actually just put in like simple primitive types as well. So for example, booleans, and then I can say like set this boolean to true if it's about TechDays beer, and then the chat orchestration will just populate these parameters for you as well. And so you can see here in the code is very simple. We see is the question about beer, and then we return some information about the TechDays beer, and then we return that back to chat, and then chat will generate the final chat message that you see. So that way we still apply all these all the formatting and stuff, so it keeps looking consistent. So what I've done in this AL extension, I just have an app, or a page I should say, which is on top of the system table, and here I can just modify it. So what I can do is I can just start running the server. Actually, let me just restart it, then you can see it from scratch. So yeah, it's running. And then, so I can go to my MCP server setup page, and I'll delete the Dwivedi one, and then I'll just add this to page ID 0, so we load it in all the time. And I'm using ngrok to support proxying from this deployment in SAS to my local machine, so that's how it can kind of connect. So you can see I have an endpoint there. And so if I restart the conversation, it will load in the new MCP server, and I can ask questions like, yeah, what types of BC TechDays years are there? And if I open the console, you'll see that my service received the you'll see my service received the request to list the tools and returned it. It received the intent, which is like what types of TechDays appears are there, and you can see that my boolean was set to true, and my service has responded with some information, and obviously it's a live demo, so it says I can't assist with that. Yeah, I mean maybe we can try one time. What do we any BC TechDays? Yes. I'll try one more time. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. That's how it is. Here we go. Good. So yeah, I do have any BC TechDays, and you'll see that in my code, I just return like a simple list of the beers, but we've applied our formatting here, so you can see that we've made like the things bold and that kind of stuff. And there's some alcohol-free options, and we say cheers. So it's kind of cool. Yeah, I hope you like that. So I'll jump back to the slides, and I've got to be quick. But basically, yeah, a point I'm trying to make here is that I definitely see that like some path here with AL and MCP. It's very cool. I think that AL developers can define MCP servers to connect to with chat. But if I get my like crystal ball out and try and predict the future a little bit, it would make a lot of sense as well to provide other extensibility options for AL to be able to load in MCP servers in other contexts. For example, we have like the AI toolkit and that kind of thing. So yeah, if you thought this was cool or interesting or maybe relevant to some scenario you have in your mind, I'll head over to the Microsoft booth after the talk, and I'd love to chat. And that's it. Thanks. If you got any questions, go for it.
So I have a question for you, Sam.
Yeah, go for it.
So for example, if I have my own documentation,
Yeah.
right, and it's a local documentation,
Yeah.
can I also just create an MCP server on top of my documentation and connect it to chat?
Yeah, so if you had if the MCP server was publicly accessible from SAS,
Right.
and then the MCP server had connectivity to your local documentation, like if you did that plumbing, yeah, that would work.
Awesome.
So
And is there also a way we ensure responsible AI with the MCP implementation?
yeah. So we still have all the kind of guardrails that we have in place for chat. So we have all our like harmful content detection before sending the request to your service, and also when the response is sent back, that's also kind of filtered through this, like as I said, as part of the chat message that gets regenerated at the end. Obviously, if you start generating harmful content there, that will also not be propagated.
All right.
So we still have a few checks. We also have like off-topic detection. So like of the skills that you can disable internally, that's one you can't.
All right.
But yeah, the others are.
Thanks.
They're good. Any questions? Sorry, I'll just run up. I don't want to hit anyone in the head. There you go.
Thank you. Okay, so I just had a quick question to start with the help URL for the docs.
Yeah.
You said it needed to be indexed by Bing.
Yeah.
What does it exactly that mean?
So we use the. You can think of the documentation query. Here's a T-shirt, by the way. Very important. You can think of it as when the user types a query into chat, we generate effectively search terms that would be passed into Bing, but then scoped to the domain of the URL of the help URL in the app JSON, and then based on the results that come back from there. So therefore, Bing needs to know about your content. They are handed back over to chat.
So in theory, those URLs should be public.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so exactly. So if you have like authentication or that kind of thing, unfortunately, it's not going to work out of the box. MCP is one way to solve this. Maybe there will be other ways as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
No worries. Yeah, there's a person just behind.
So yeah, in Copilot Studio you have like knowledge sources, and
Yeah.
you can assign, for example, SharePoint. So will it be possible for the end customer to make their own definitions on things, on their processes? Will that be supported in Business Central?
So this is a very nice question, because it's kind of what I was alluding to with other ways potentially. So right now you can think of that we only use Bing as the knowledge source. What we're planning to release, you won't be able to specify additional knowledge sources, but it's definitely like something we're thinking about. So
Okay.
find me at the booth, and we can talk more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe time for one more question. We've got 1 minute. It's right behind you. Or anyone is fine. Yeah.
Just a small question. If we created a separate extension for modifications and we have added some fields to the customer table, we need to set up an MCP for our documentation.
Yeah.
If the user searches for that field on the customer, is the documentation of the default and our extension combined in the answer?
Yes. So the default implementation, if you're just providing your own help URL, is it will combine the knowledge of the Business Central, Microsoft Learn documentation, and your documentation. So if there are both, then you will get answers with both. If it's not able to generate a satisfying answer, it will at the very least generate links, and then you'll see both documentation sources and look further.
Okay,
cool.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm out of time now, I think, so we'll let the next group up.